Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to dive into, a pretty powerful idea for understanding maybe why the world feels so chaotic sometimes, especially when you look at global finance. Our source today is Simon Dixon, a real pioneer in finance and Bitcoin, and a concept, something he calls the proof of weapons network.
Yeah, Simon Dixon is fascinating. He has this knack for pulling together economics, tech, and geopolitics in a way few others do. And he's not just talking theory. He actually called the 2008 crisis. He co-founded Blink to the Future, which, backed huge names like Kraken, Coinbase.
Right, and he even advised El Salvador on their Bitcoin move.
President Bukele, yeah.
Yeah.
So he's definitely been in the trenches trying to figure out what he calls the architecture of control.
Okay, so this proof of weapons network, it sounds pretty intense. What does he actually mean by that? He says it's not some secret club, right?
Exactly, not a conspiracy theory like that. Dixon basically calls it a mafia-style debt-based Ponzi scheme. He traces it back to the Bank of England, like 1694, funding the British Empire. And he argues the U.S. Federal Reserve kind of took over that model later on. The core idea is that it thrives on concentrated wealth. It actually needs inequality to work.
Inequality is a feature, not a bug.
That's his argument, yeah. And its fuel, its drug, as he puts it, is debt, constant debt.
So if it's an operating system, not a, shadowy group pulling strings, who are the key players? Who makes up this network?
Well, he lays out a few key groups. Foundational are the central banks. Think the Fed, obviously, but coordinated through the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS.
The central bank for central banks?
Right. They're kind of the architects.
Yeah.
Then you have the huge asset managers. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. It's these guys. Through the sheer amount of assets they manage, they indirectly control, tons of shares and board seats globally. He mentions tools like BlackRock's Aladdin AI platform.
Oh, yeah, Aladdin. That gives them a massive view of the market, right?
A huge view and huge influence. But it's not just public markets. He also points to private equity and hedge funds.
The deep state firms, he calls them.
Yeah, like KKR, Blackstone. Their specialty, Dixon says, is coming in after a crisis, think reconstruction contracts, and buying up assets when they're dirt cheap. Then, of course, the global banks. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citi, HSBC. Many are shareholders of the Fed itself. They create the complex financial products that, often get governments deeper in debt.
Okay, so banks, asset managers, private equity. What else?
Multinational corporations. Big tech, Google, Apple, Microsoft controlling the digital pipes. Big energy, ExxonMobil, Shell controlling resources. Dixon argues they aren't really loyal to any single country. They operate globally.
Stateless powers, almost.
Yeah.
And then you have individuals, old money and new.
Exactly. He mentions the billionaire families, like the Rothschilds and Rockefellers, who he argues were key in setting up central banking in the first place, and now they're joined by, the modern tech billionaires, Musk, Bezos, and others.
And who enforces all this?
That's where the intelligence agencies come in, according to Dixon. MI6, CIA, Mossad, he calls them the enforcers, using things like covert operations, regime changes, and psychological ops or psyops to kind of control wealth flows and resources behind the scenes.
Wow, okay. That's quite a network structure. So how does it actually work? What's the playbook?
The main engine, he says, is debt as a weapon. The whole system is like a Ponzi scheme because when banks create money by making loans, they create the principal, but not the money needed to pay the interest on that principal.
So there's never enough money to pay everything back.
Precisely. Which means you constantly need more debt, new loans, just to service the old debt. It's a treadmill. And this spills over into financial warfare, using financial tools like sanctions, economic pressure, currency manipulation, often structured through bodies like the IMF and the World Bank.
And they influence politics directly, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Huge amounts of capital go into lobbying, funding campaigns. Dixon basically says they rent parliaments. Plus, setting policy agendas through groups like the World Economic Forum and enforcing financial rules via things like the Financial Action Task Force, FATF.
So against this backdrop, this proof of weapons system, which Dixon says requires control, violence, endless debt. He contrasts it with Bitcoin.
Right. He presents Bitcoin's proof of work as the alternative. Peaceful, decentralized. He actually calls Bitcoin a kind of speculative attack on the whole central banking model.
An exit from financial oppression, I think he says.
Yeah, it's a powerful framing.
So Dixon's point seems to be that understanding this network, this proof of weapons system, is step one if you want to reclaim some kind of personal sovereignty. What really stands out is this idea that the system isn't broken. It was built this way. on purpose.
Which really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If the global financial system is structured like this, like a debt-based Ponzi scheme, how does that change how you think about stability,
Mm.
about security, the future of money?
And maybe the biggest question he leaves us with, how might something like Bitcoin, a decentralized alternative, actually shift that power balance? Definitely something to chew on.